Is this on thing? Let me move this.
Okay, I have read, you had several about that. I can see why it didn't work out. Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. My name is Anna Rausch. I'm with the Coalition for the Homeless. Thank you for coming today for our homeless count training. We're very excited, as we always are every year, to see how well we're doing in ending homelessness in our COC. How many of you have never done this before? Oh, wow.
That's how it was the other
Wow, that's fantastic. That's almost the whole room. That's great. Then y'all need to come forward a little bit more and pay attention. Just kidding. So thank you for coming. We would not be able to do the homeless count without all of you. The Coalition is a very small organization, and we have to cover 3,700 square miles. So there's no way that we would have all of this participation and all the things that are required for us to do without tons and tons and tons of volunteers. So I can't thank you enough. Believe me when I tell you that we would not be able to do this without you. So thank you. Hopefully everyone got a shirt and a training booklet. The training booklet, there's a couple of errors in there that I'll get to when we get to that slide, but it's what I'm going to be covering up here on the screen, so you can just take that home with you, make notes on it in case you have to refer to it later. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the homeless count. So in 2019, when we did this in January of 2019, after we tallied up all of the results, we had 3,938 people homeless in the 3,700-mile radius of Montgomery, Fort Bend, and Harris counties. So the homeless count is just a snapshot. It is a point in time. That's why we refer to it as the PIT. And it is federally mandated. It's a methodology that HUD came up, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development came up with a long time ago. And even though it is just a point in time, gives us a pretty good idea of what homelessness looks like across the country. So of the 3,900, 41% or 1,600 were living in a place not meant for human habitation. That means they were out on the streets or in a car or in a park. And then 59% of those were living in an emergency shelter or transitional housing. That means they were sheltered. So there's two parts to the count. And then this represents a 5% decrease from the previous year, and then a 54% decrease since we started doing this way back in the day. Now, in 2017, we did see a slight uptick due to Hurricane Harvey. We'd had a decrease every year in the homeless count since 2011. And then for the 2018 count, we did see a slight increase, and 18% of the people that reported homeless during that count said that they became homeless due to Hurricane Harvey. So unfortunately, that was one of the many negative impacts of the hurricane. Some characteristics of the 2019 count. We didn't have any families or children under the age of 18 living unsheltered, which is fantastic. That means we didn't have any families out there on the day that we counted. 1 in 4 people met the definition of experiencing chronic homelessness, and I'll go over that a little bit later. 1 in 3 people reported a mental illness. 1 in 3 people had a substance use, not surprising in the population that we serve. 1 in 7 were domestic violence victims. 1 in 9 was a veteran. We did announce an end to veteran homelessness in 2015, so we are at what we call steady state. So although we do see homeless veterans on the street, if we are able to get all of those veterans into a housing option, there would be a housing option for them. That's what it means to be at functional zero. So we were the first large city in the US to end veteran homelessness. 2 in 5 people living in shelter were experiencing homelessness for the first time, and then we still have some that are homeless due to Hurricane Harvey, so that's 1 in 9. We only asked this question during the unsheltered count. And then if you see the red line is the shelter count. Oh, I'm so sorry. Apologize. Let me stop this for a minute. Get this little thing out of the way. There we go. Much better. So if you look at the red line, that represents the sheltered count. And then the blue line represents the unsheltered count. So you see that the sheltered count kind of went up compared to the unsheltered count going down. We want that to happen because we were really working hard with our shelters to try to get people to come in from outside and use our emergency shelters like navigation. So people that were in the path for housing, we encouraged them to come into a shelter so that we could find them and they could meet with their housing navigator. So that way we wouldn't lose them on the path to housing. And then unfortunately that went back up because we did have a large shelter that closed down that one year. And so you saw that, we see that some of the impacts of that resulted in our unsheltered count, our shelter count going back up and then flipping, et cetera, et cetera. So why do we count? A lot of people ask that. Why do we have to do those? Well, first of all, it's required. Like I mentioned, it's federally mandated. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development says that this has to happen every year in January. And the Continuum of Care Lead Agency, which is the Coalition for the Homeless, has to carry out the activity of the homeless count. The Coalition for the Homeless has been the lead agency in the COC for, I think we've been the only lead agency, right? I don't think there was ever another lead agency. And so the homeless count has changed a little bit over time. Before 2016, we used to do it at night, and that's how most cities in the nation do it. They go out and then they see people that may be experiencing homelessness, and they just make little tally marks for the people that they think might be homeless. The reason why we're doing it the way that we're doing it is because we've decreased homelessness to such a degree that it's more manageable. And we did get permission from HUD to do it the way that we do it now. These numbers are reported to HUD, and they're put into a huge report that goes to Congress. And then Congress determines how much money is going to go into all of the various continuums of care. So that determines not only federal funds, but also local government, so city, county, and state government funding. The homeless count determines how much money we're going to get. It also shows how well we're doing or how well we're not doing. So in 2011, Houston had the 6th largest homeless population in the country. And so we were identified at that time as a priority community by HUD for intervention. So the way that none of this would have been possible without knowing how many people are homelessness in a given region. We're also able to determine subpopulations. So for example, if we are all of a sudden seeing that there's a lot of homeless youth or unsheltered youth out and running around the city, or if we see encampments in parts of the county out in the suburbs, all of those things we're able to identify with the homeless count, the unsheltered count. So we can target interventions based on what we're seeing during the count. Coordinated access. Okay, so make sure the reason why I'm talking about coordinated access is because we use coordinated access during the homeless count. So I'm not sure if any city in the nation, they might be, but as far as I know, we're one of the few cities that use coordinated access in our homeless count. So coordinated access is the only path to housing in our COC. It's an assessment process. So in order to get into permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing in our continuum of care, you must go through a coordinated access process. So it's an assessment that asks, a person's homeless history, if they have any disabilities, et cetera, to determine what the best housing intervention is for them. And the reason why we use, the way that we use coordinated access is that when you go out there on a team, if your team is going to what we call a hotspot, we're going to try to put a coordinated access trained assessor on that team. So that coordinated access trained assessor will assess anyone who's a veteran or who may be experiencing chronic homelessness, and also if there's a youth. And it's really important because sometimes we don't see people except during the count, because there's so many of us, so many volunteers wearing those bright shirts all over the city, and media knows about it, and the news is covering it all 3 days. And so more people come out and engage with us, and we're often able to find people and get them in our pipeline for housing during the homeless count as opposed to other times. So that's why we use coordinated access in our survey process. So today, coordinated access, we have 13 assessment hubs. They're located in all of the shelters that we have downtown, the major shelters. They're in some drop-in centers, some ministries in the suburbs. All of our outreach teams are trained coordinated access assessor navigators. That means that they can assess and navigate people into housing in the field. The person never has to come in. There's some seats over here in the front if y'all want to come sit down. Don't be scared, I won't bite. And then everything happens in our HMIS. So HMIS stands for Homeless Management Information System. That is the client level database that the database that we use to capture client level data. Anyone that receives HUD funding is required to enter their client level information into our HMIS. And so coordinated access happens in HMIS. The referral process, the matching to disability assistance, for example, the matching to housing, matching to income. The consent is electronic. They sign it either on an iPad or with the mouse. So that way the person doesn't have to repeat their story a million times. Every time they go to a different provider, everything is captured in the system. We have over 20 navigators that helps people navigate from the point of referral to housing all the way until they move in. And then again, the referrals and all of that information is tracked in HMIS, and the Coalition for the Homeless monitors all that to make sure that people are not getting lost in the shuffle and no one's falling through the cracks. All right, so most important thing you have to remember, the count is all day long during the day. We put that all over our website, but you would be surprised how many people sign up and don't realize that it's during the day. We no longer do it at night. We haven't been doing it at night since 2015. Starting 2016, we do it during the day. We meet at 7 a.m. We don't go past 4, ever. We've been doing this for a long time. I don't think we've ever gone past 4 o'clock. But the captains will show up at the staging areas at 6:30. Bring your coffee with you and your breakfast, because we won't have that available, unfortunately. And the days of the count are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 28th, 29th, and 30th. Some of you signed up all 3 days. Some of you signed up for just 1 day. But those are the 3 days. Make sure you know which day you signed up for. Day 1, we count inside the 610 loop, within the 610 loop of the city. And that's because that is the day that the areas are heavily populated with more homeless people compared to the other 2 days. Day 2, we count east of 45 and 288. So that's east, all the way up to Montgomery County, all the way down to like Baytown, all of those areas. And then on day 3, we count west of 45 and 288. So that includes Fort Bend County. We go all the way to Richmond and all the way out into the outlying Fort Bend County areas. So each day we have a staging area that you have to show up at. And we have people sign up based on staging location. So when you get to your staging location, you're going to form your teams when you get there. And then your staging area captain is going to give you a map. It's a key map. I'll show you a picture of it. It's if you've ever looked at a key map, it's just a laminated section of the key map, and you're going to cover that entire area, and you'll park, whoever's driving will park their vehicle, and then you'll walk around, and if anyone looks like they are experiencing homelessness, we have a little script, and you just approach them and you ask if they would be willing to be interviewed, and everything happens via an app. There's no paper involved. So these are the staging locations. A little bit hard to see, but they're in your book. The reason why the staging locations are very important is because we know how many map sections are assigned to each staging location, okay? So if the staging location says that we need, let's say, 60 teams to cover 60 map sections, then that's how many people need to have registered at that staging location. So what happens often, and what happened last year especially, is that people sign up. Let's say I signed up for the Beacon, And my friend wanted to come to the Beacon with me, but when she tried to sign up for the Beacon, there was no more spaces available because the Beacon was full. So she went ahead and signed up at Guadalupe Center, but then on the morning of the count, she came to the Beacon with me. So what happens is that the Beacon now has one extra person that they may not be able to accommodate on a team, and then Guadalupe Center is short a person. So that happened quite a bit last year. There were also people that didn't show up. So we had a lot of teams that had to cover more than one map section. And once you start getting out into the suburbs, it's really, really challenging to cover 2 map sections when you're having to drive all the way to the Grand Parkway and over, around, and come back. So please, if you cannot attend, let us know or send someone in your place. And if you register for a staging location, make sure you report to that staging location that morning so that we're not short volunteers. So count teams, even though we have these listed out, we're not strict on this. So for example, if the driver wants to be a surveyor at this also, that's fine by us. There are some people that don't feel comfortable approaching anyone to do surveys. We're totally okay with that. If you prefer to just drive, that's okay. But if you're a driver and you also want to interview, by all means, especially if you get to an area where there's a lot of people, as many people as possible that can do the survey is best. So we have a driver, a navigator, a surveyor. Some teams will have multiple surveyors. We try not to put teams with less than 3 people. We did have to do that last year with experienced outreach teams because there were people that didn't show up. We don't want that to happen. So please make sure, again, I can't say it enough. If you signed up, make sure you show up. You should be able to use your cell phone to do the mobile app. I'll talk a little bit about what the mobile app, how much data and stuff it uses. And then a detailed map will be provided to you. So the driver, pretty self-explanatory on what these roles should be. The driver is going to be the one that drives, should have insurance, should be able to fit at least 4 to 5 people in their vehicles. The driver is responsible for finding a safe parking spot to park at, and you make sure you lock your vehicle. Navigator, if you are experienced with maps or you're really good with directions, you can be the person to tell the driver which way to go. If you're not good with directions, don't be that person because we don't want you to get lost. And then the surveyor is going to be the person that is doing the interview. Again, it can be all 4 people on the team if you want. It doesn't matter to us as long as one person on that team is doing the interviews. The spotter can also be a surveyor. They're the ones that are kind of looking out and seeing if maybe there's some encampments or some sleeping bags or people, panhandling that you don't know if they're homeless or not. So you can just go up to them and ask. So that the spotter usually does that. And then of course the coordinated access assessor, as I mentioned, if there are any trained ones that are participating during the count, we will ask if possible for them to do some assessments while they're counting. So interviews versus observation. When you do the survey, you'll see that there are 2 options on the survey. There's an observational tally and there's an interview. The observational tally should only be used in the rarest of circumstances if you can't get to the person or if it's very dangerous. Let's say you see someone on the other side of a highway and you'd have to cross the highway or you'd have to get to it in a very dangerous way. We don't want you to put yourself in danger. So in that situation, you would observe that there's a male, age range, ethnicity if possible, and all of that, and you would put that in the observation tally. We much prefer interviews. And the reason why, if you see on this chart, in 2018, we had 582 interviews and 1,000 observations. So way more observations than interviews. And last year, or in 2019, we had almost the same. Even though it was better that we had more interviews and observations, it was almost 50-50. The reason why it's important for us to get as many interviews as possible is because if we have blank information or observations, we have to make assumptions about that information, and we don't want to make assumptions. So let me use an example. If 50%, or if we had 50-50 observation and interviews, and let's say all 50 of those people said that they're veterans, just exaggerating. So we have to assume that all 50% of the observations are also veterans because 50% of them were, or however many percent of them on the interviews were veterans. So the problem with that is that more than likely not all of those are veterans, but we have to report that. So then we would say we have way more veterans than we actually do. So we have to do that for chronic homelessness, we have to do that for youth, we have to do that for veterans, and all the various subpopulations. So the more observations that we have, the greater that number is, the greater the observation, the greater the assumptions that we have to make. And we don't want to do that. We want to actually have the right information. So we want there to be way more interviews than there are observations. So in previous years, some issues that we encountered, volunteers did not complete the survey. So once you complete a survey, you have to hit submit. If you don't hit submit, then it doesn't come to the command center. The surveys are happening live, so we can see all over the counties as you're doing this, so you must hit submit on the app. We had too many observations versus actual surveys, as I mentioned. There were questions that were skipped. Too many blanks, demographic, no demographics. Again, the blanks are treated just like observations. So if we have, 100% surveys, but nobody put gender, then we're going to have to make some assumptions on gender or, ethnicity or race. So it's really important that you don't skip any questions. When you're practicing on the survey tool, you see that there's sometimes a space in between questions. So it kind of gets, you may accidentally think that that is a space, but really it's just a drop down. You actually have to click in the space and you'll see the answers on the drop down menu. And we're going to practice a little bit on the app so you'll know what I'm talking about. No shows, going to the wrong staging location, I mentioned. A lot of missing race and gender. Many surveys listed other for race if the person was Hispanic. So there's an ethnicity and there's a race question. It'll ask if the person is Hispanic, yes or no. You're going to put yes or no, and then it'll ask the person's race. So these are two separate questions. Don't put other because it's actually capturing that information already. If you are, when you get to your staging location, please, please, please make sure you sign in. This is very important, especially if you're one of those agencies that you are required to participate, either because you receive COC funds or because you are an HMIS user. And so a lot of people forgot to sign in last year, and when it came time to verify during the NOFA, we couldn't verify because the person didn't sign in. So please make sure you sign in. And then also make sure you enable location services on your mobile device because again, these surveys are the GPS location are captured and we can actually make a map of where the surveys are. All right, so the homeless definitions, the reason why you should familiarize yourself with the homeless definitions is because if you have a coordinated access assessor on your team, you need to be able to determine if the person you're interviewing, is chronically homeless. So a person is chronically homeless if they have a disabling condition or disability, which we do ask those on the survey, that prohibits them from working, and they've been homeless for either 3 years, totaling 12 months, or the past 12 continuous months. So when you're talking to someone, if you believe that they meet that criteria and you have a coordinated access assessor on your team, then once you complete your survey, you would say, hang on a second, I'd like for you to talk to this person here to see if maybe we can do a housing assessment on you. So that applies to people that are chronically homeless, veterans, and youth, 18 to 24. Sheltered homeless are those that are in HMIS and they're in a shelter, and we're going to pull that directly from the system. And then unsheltered is the ones that you're going to be encountering during those 3 days. This is what a sample survey map looks like. It's kind of on its side, but you will be given a map and you'll either get section A or B, or you'll get the entire map depending on the location. So you and your team, that's going to be your designated area. You shouldn't go outside those areas. All right, so how do you know if someone is experiencing homelessness? These are just some guidelines. You can use your, your best judgment. But usually people that are wearing many layers of clothing or blankets, especially on cold days like today, we never know what the weather is going to look like on the last week of January. We've had freezing temperatures, we've had hot temperatures, we've had rain, we've had pretty much everything as we know in Houston. Yes, no. Poor physical condition, poor hygiene, weathered skin, lots of belongings, shopping basket full of stuff next to a sleeping bag. Sleeping or lying on the ground, parks, railway bridges, underpasses, pushing a cart, tents, blankets, cars parked with a lot of belongings, fogged up windows in vehicles. And then here's some do's and don'ts. Please make sure you report to your staging area on time, because it's really hard once a team is gone for you to catch up with them because they're driving around. Stay with your team. Keep your doors locked when you park your car. Don't go off alone, especially if you're in a wooded area. Please don't go off alone. Please be safe. Look for signs of people experiencing homelessness. A really good thing to do is to ask around the neighborhood. So like I mentioned, the news media is going to be covering this, so everyone's aware that this happens every year. So gas station attendants, police officers in that area, sometimes metro bus drivers, if they're stopped, for their break, ask them if they've seen anyone who may be homeless in that area, and they'll direct you to that location. It's very, very helpful, especially when they're there every day working in that neighborhood. They know where people go. Study your map area, report accurately, use your best judgment, manage your time, check in with your staging area captain. If you have questions, feel free to stop for lunch, bathroom breaks, whatever that may be. If you're in danger, call 911. Don't allow any team members to leave the vehicle, to be alone in the vehicle is really what that should say. Don't take any risks. Don't venture too far from the area around your vehicle. Don't venture outside of your map boundaries, because you may encounter another team that's counting in that area. And the first question on the survey is, has anybody interviewed you already during this homeless count? So if the person says yes, then the survey stops. But if the person says no, then you can continue. So that kind of helps us make sure that we're not double counting people. Don't give money or rides, please. Don't promise any services or anything for that matter. It's very rare for someone not to want to participate in the surveys. They're usually really willing and happy to help the individuals that you encounter. So don't offer any kind of services or housing. Don't make promises. Don't double count. Don't touch people to wake them up. And then most importantly, don't assume. So let's say you walk by an area and there are like 3 sleeping bags, but no one is there. You're not going to put an observation tally that you saw that there are 3 people there, because there weren't. For all you know, that area could be abandoned. So only put down what you actually physically see. Okay? Not even if somebody told you. There's usually 3 men there. Don't put it down unless you actually see it. And then don't put down, so for example, let's say you're interviewing someone and they display symptoms of a severe mental illness, but when you ask them that, they tell you no, you're gonna have to put down what they tell you and not what you think. The reason why that's important is because if we try to intervene and try to house that person is going to deny that he or she has a disability, and they won't be eligible for a certain type of intervention. So we have to report what the person is actually telling you and not what you think. So be courteous and respectful of an individual's right to privacy. Position yourself at a person's eye level. Be mindful that you're encroaching on their space. Don't shine flashlights at the person, shine it towards yourself. There's a little script for you to use to practice introducing yourself. Remember, when you're coming into a person's space, they're living in a tent, or even if there's a tarp or whatever and their sleeping bags, ask if you can come in, because they do consider that their home. And just be respectful. We never really had any issues during the count. These are just some volunteers doing the count. And then let's talk about some FAQs. So what happens if I don't have cell reception when conducting a survey? So you're going to save the survey as a draft and submit once your cell service resumes. And then how much data can I expect the app to use? 30 surveys use less data than streaming a single 4-minute song. So it's not a lot of data. How much space will the app use on my device? It's less than 6 megabytes. In comparison, 300 emails is 100 megabytes. Talked about the staging areas and not going to the wrong one, the one that you're assigned to. My team finished our map area. Can we count in another? No. Sometimes the staging area captain may ask you to go help, if you're finished in your area, and another team is having a lot of people in their area, the staging area captain may ask you to go to that area and meet up with that team to help them do interviews. But only if your staging area captain tells you this. So on the day of the count, we're gonna have copies at the staging areas of street guides to give to people. It has shelter information on there if they're interested. Some helpful numbers to have. Again, if there's an emergency, you should call 911. But your staging area captain is going to give you their cell phone number so you can contact or text if you have any questions or concerns. And then the various county phone numbers are listed. So what do you need to begin? You need a charged phone or device that you will use for the count. You're going to download the Counting Us app from either Google Play or the App Store. If you participated last year, you're going to use your same user ID and password, but if you haven't, then you're going to create an account and log in. And then everyone, if you'll take your book out, where it has this slide in your book, I need everybody to write in Houston 20. I believe in the books it says Houston 19. So please scratch that out and put Houston 20. It was a typo, I apologize. So then you're going to tap Get Started to get to the screen, which displays the list of surveys, and select Houston PIT 2020. And then I mentioned the PIT interview and observation, and then you're going to enable location services on your phone. So let's go ahead and do that now. If you look at the screen, you take out your device, download the Counting Us app. There's a little barcode on your book if you'd like to try. Just scan it. It'll tell you, show you how to download it. It's called Counting Us, and it's blue, a blue circle with a check mark. Thank you for your help. Appreciate it. Whoever didn't get a book, did anybody need a book? Thank you very much, sir. Anybody else need a book? Make sure you grab some shirts on your way out as well. Okay, so step one, you're going to download the app. Step two, if you've never done this before, you're going to click register. Or if you have done this before, you're going to click login. And then it's going to ask you to join account, and it's going to ask you for a setup key. And the setup key is Houston 20 with a capital H. Does anybody need help? Yes, you need help? Can somebody run over there and help her?
Sorry, where are you supposed to put it?
It's going to ask you for the setup key. And it's capital H. So if you want to look up at the screen, it looks like this. You're going to click on Get Started. I've already logged in. So once you put in your information, you should come to this screen. Looks like this on your phone. So you have a homeless survey, unsheltered, and then an observation tally. This count is in test mode. You can see it at the top. So it doesn't matter what you put in here. You're not going to mess anything up. So I want you to practice by clicking on unsheltered survey. The first thing it's going to ask you is if you're an individual or a household. I'm going to select individual. And then it's going to determine your location automatically. If it says it can't determine your location, it's either because you're not getting a signal or because you don't have location services enabled on your phone. Then you're going to click next. The first question is, have you already been interviewed for the homeless count? And I'm going to select no. Oops. Sorry, you see how I accidentally pushed the back button and my survey is down here as a draft? That's because I accidentally pushed the back button. So you can go back and get to your survey again if you do that. So you can either open the draft or remove the draft. And then you can just put fake information in. You can put test. You can put your name in test. You can put whatever you want. And then over the next few days, over the next week, until next week, I want you to go around and interview everybody in your family and your friends. So you can practice. Does anybody need any help or is having difficulty getting to this section? So this looks just like your phone up here. So I'm going to select street or sidewalk. And then from there, it's just a continuous scroll all the way down. So it's going to ask what the person's name is. I'm going to put Anna Test. You don't have to put in initials if they give you their name. Gender. And then it's going to ask for your date of birth. And you can just keep going all the way down. But you can see how these could accidentally be mistaken for spaces. And volunteers will skip because there isn't already a default answer there. You actually have to select it. And then when you put in the date of birth, here, you can see that it defaults to 1980. The reason why we did that is because last year people were just putting the month and the date and not selecting the year. They just left the year as 2019. So we had a lot of 1-year-olds or a lot of 5-month-olds or whatever we were at, 2-week-olds or whatever. So make sure you select the year of the date of birth as well. If you
I
do
like
that,
the 80 because you can either go up a little bit or down a little bit instead
right,
of starting
all the way, yeah. And then if you put the date of birth, so date of birth is required, not the actual date of birth, an age is required. So if the person doesn't want to give you a date of birth, you can put an age range. If the person gives you their date of birth, it's not going to ask you for the age. If you ask for the person's date of birth and they don't want to give it to you, then you can say, would you be willing to give me your age? And if they still don't give it to you, then put the age range. So the preferences are date of birth, age, and then age range. But one of those three are required. And whichever one you put in, you don't have to select the other two. And then the race, here's the options for race. Bless you. And right after that is, are you Hispanic or Latino? So these are two separate. Don't put other. Okay? Try not to select other as much as possible. There are going to be circumstances where you're in the middle of an interview and they don't want to participate anymore. So just complete what you have and go ahead and submit with missing information. Does anybody have any questions? They need help.
So let me clarify that race thing. So if they are Hispanic, you don't answer, put anything.
No, you do. You answer both. So Hispanic can be black or white. So the first one is going to be, here, sorry. So the first one is, what is your race? So let's say you're interviewing me. You're going to select white, because I'm white, but I'm also Hispanic or Latina. So you're also going to select yes. But you can ask them, are you Hispanic? Because let's say you're interviewing someone who's black. They're going to say, I'm black. And you can say, are you Hispanic? Yes or no? Good question. Okay, so we have a couple of new things. Some of you that are site-based, we can, or if you have like an iPad or something, you can do this on the web. It's the exact same survey. Some of you, like some of our partners at the VA, for whatever reason, they couldn't download the app on their VA phones. It's restricted. So you either have to talk to your IT department if you have a work phone that you're trying to use to get them to download the app. But if push comes to shove, you can actually open up a web browser on your device and go to counting.us. And it's the exact same survey. You log in just like you would on the phone, and you can do it on the web. So there's a couple of new things for 2020. The first one is a place to revisit. So on the observation tally, let's say you are at a place where you see the 3 sleeping bags, but there's no one there. Then you're on the observation tally, you're going to select that this is a place to revisit. That's going to tell me to remember those places so that we can possibly send outreach teams out on a later date to investigate. So this is really going to be helpful for us, especially for locations where there's a lot. There could be like a large encampment and no one's there. We definitely want to know about it so we can send outreach out to that area to intervene. Yes, it's on the app, on the observation tally. The observation tally, when you click on it, it's only if you can't interview someone. If the person refused, for example, then you would put what you observe. You would put the the age range, male, female, white, Hispanic, etc.
Would that be under household or individual?
Which one?
The
observation tally. It would be neither one. So that's you are in an actual interview. So the observation tally is at the beginning. It's on here. Let me show you. So I'm going to X out. No, I'm going to go back. Yes. Okay, so when you're getting started, you have 2 options. You have a homeless survey, unsheltered, and then you have an observation tally. The observation tally is you're observing, you're not actually interviewing. So if you're observing that there's multiple people, then you could potentially select household. I personally would probably just do individual and then just do it multiple times for the individual. So then you select individual, and from there you just put in what you observed. It's not showing the place to revisit is going to be under here. Yeah, it's just, I'm sorry, it's not updated. I misunderstood your question. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. And then the other new thing that we have is this thing called Miracle Messages, and you can go back later to your office or home and Google Miracle Messages. So basically at the very end of the survey, it's going to ask, do you have any family or friends that you'd like to reconnect with, even if you don't know how to reach them? If the person says yes, then a little survey will pop up that will ask if they would like to record a video or write a message. Once you do that, you submit it, and it goes to this organization called Miracle Messages. And those people, they have volunteers that scour the internet and social media for these people's family members or friends. And if they're able to contact them, they will connect with that person. So it's really neat. If you go to their website, you'll see some videos of people that they've actually been able to find their family for them. Yes.
I just did that part of it, said that the answer complete the family friend survey at the end with the
Yeah, it's because it's in test mode. Yeah. Once we go live, so on that Tuesday, actually I'll probably make it go live. So that Tuesday morning, this is going to go live. So you can keep practicing with fake information up until Monday the 27th. After that, it's real. So once it goes live, then it's going to be on there. All right, that is it. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Anybody apprehensive? A little bit? Would anybody like to share some, those of you that, raise your hand if you've done this multiple times. Would you like to share your experience? Anyone? Please share their experience on how it goes when you're interviewing people. Go ahead.
I think it's a little difficult because of the weather, and it's maybe too early in the morning for them to be up, so you would have to go around the same area probably more than once.
Oh, very good.
Just to make sure you're counting the procedure to come out late.
That's a very good point. Yeah, she said that sometimes in the early morning when you're starting, people are still asleep. You don't want to go in there and bombard them, so you might have to come back later and drive through that area again to see if they're up and about to interview them. Anybody else willing to share what it's like to interview people? Anyone? To share with the newbies? Go ahead.
They were ones that we had talked to were very approachable, willing to share information.
She said that everyone they talked to was very approachable and willing to share information.
And those that didn't said it.
Right, and those that didn't said it. That's correct. That's been my experience as well. And I've gone on outreach a lot with our outreach team, so. And if you feel uncomfortable, let your staging area captain know so they can put you on a team with someone who's experienced. That way you're not going out there, we're not going to feed you to the wolves. Or if you don't want to do it and you'd rather just participate in driving, for example, you could be the driver. And then once you see people doing the interviews after a while, you kind of like, oh, okay, I got this. And then you can start doing it. A lot of time, we got a lot of, not a lot, I would say that there were a lot of concerns when we switched to this method as opposed to the counting, that we were going to miss people. It's possible that we might miss people or that we might count someone who's homeless when they're not. But the other way, we also miss people because it was at night, 10 o'clock at night and on a cold Wednesday, they're sleeping. They're huddled down, under the bridge or in their encampments. And when you're driving, you would for sure miss them. So we feel that interviewing people is a much more reliable way of making sure that they're actually homeless. Any questions, concerns?
So homeless camps, like you just count them, but you don't try to intervene in any way, or is somebody gonna call or help?
So when you say like 18 to 24-year-olds?
No, like younger than that.
If you encounter a child by themselves, you should probably contact your staging captain and we'll probably call 911 or non-emergency police. But that's it. I mean, it's very rare to encounter a child, under 18-year-old by themselves. If they're with a family member, then you're just going to interview them as a family and you're going to put their information in. Yes.
If people have questions about where this data is going, is there any?
Where the what?
Where the data is going or where their information is going?
Oh, sure. So you can tell them that their information, well, just not their actual information, but the aggregate, the total is going to the federal government to determine resources for our area. And then their specific information is only, as far as their name and date of birth, we're only going to compare that information to our HMIS to see if they're in the process for housing. Maybe we lost them, we couldn't find, they were referred to housing, but we couldn't find them. So we don't share other than that. Yes, we treat client information very seriously. We do not release it with anyone. We do have data sharing agreements with research organizations, but we share de-identified information for aggregate purposes. Yes.
So for some people that are agency, like there's a group of two of us going on each day, they're definitely going to be on our team with us, right? Or is it going to be like prearranged teams?
No, you're going to form teams the day that you get there.
Oh.
That morning, yeah. We had prearranged teams, and I tried to put people from the same organization together. But what ended up happening is that people didn't show up, so then that team didn't have enough people, and then they had to wait around, and then we ended up having to combine two teams, and that was just too much. So we're just going to have people form teams based on whoever shows up that day. and then you'll get your map assignments. And if some of you are familiar with the area that you're in, that you're counting, if you know that there's some areas, definitely pick that map. Tell your staging area captain, I want to count in this area, and then find the map that pertains to that area. Any other questions? Concerns? All right. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Sheet for this morning's meeting.
No, there isn't. No sign-in sheet for the meeting.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do
Oh,
you all know where you're supposed to be, staging locations? You got that email with the address? No? Yes, you do?